Murder of Crows, Chapter 3. I fidgeted in my ill-fitting black dress pants, pulling them down to cover more of my ankles. I wasn't in the habit of collecting business casual clothing, so half of last year's Christmas church outfit would have to do. The pants had gotten way too short, but like hell was Wind going to cave in and wear a dress, so neither would I. I almost bailed on the fancy clothes completely, but after some thought, I realized that Wind was definitely right about it being more important to make a good impression. Regardless of their intentions or hobbies, some of the most influential adults in the whole town had at some point been members of the Murder of Crows. There was nothing more irritating than being treated like a child in adult spaces, and not dressing like one usually helped a bit. When the bus pulled up to the Minutes Street stop, I adjusted my bag on my shoulder, stuffed with the articles and presentation supplies I had brought, and made my way down the stairs and toward the Murder of Crows headquarters. The crow-covered house at 3141 North Minute Street had a large ivy-covered wrought iron gate with the club's symbol right in the center, ostentatious and not secretive at all. There was a long, sprawling path up to the door. I could see a white blonde of Wind's hair through the thick foliage, which made me feel a lot better about pushing the gate open. She was sitting a bit behind one of the pillars on the porch. I recognized the cuffs and bracelets around her wrist as she played with her phone, but the heels were new. Completely out of character new. Double take, then triple take new. I took my pants down yet again and cursed, thinking about Max's words earlier. "Glad to see you made it," Wind called from behind the pillar. "I was about to consider taking a long walk up the street to find you." I huffed as I jogged along the path and up the front stairs, clutching my bag in front of me. "We have 3 more minutes until the meeting starts," I began. "They should be glad we made it on time at all." "Whoa, what? Whoa!" I stared. I couldn't help it. Wind stood and smoothed her hand down the side of her dress slowly. It was a devastatingly simple black pencil dress, elegantly cut like nothing I'd ever seen anyone in this town approximate, even on their very best days. Sleeves down to her elbows, a subtle boning in the bodice, hemmed 2 inches above her knee so that the fabric stretched between her hips. Her messy, fluffy blonde hair was brushed back into a slick French twist, as severe as it was sophisticated. The chipped black nail polish on her hands had been replaced with some delicate dusty rose that had to have been borrowed from someone else in her house. It was such an alien color to see on Wind that it took a full 10 seconds to tear my eyes from it. "It's my mom's," Wind explained. She raised an eyebrow at my expression and leaned one hip against the wood pillar. "She used to walk runway for Thurry Muggler in the 90s and has a lot of this crap lying around in the basement. I usually trot it out once a year to hurt people. Mostly Ella, if I'm being honest." "Yeah, I see how this would make Ella sweat a bit," I said, semi-hysterically. "Should I have worn something fancier?" Wind laughed, and the illusion was shattered with the familiar crinkling of her nose. "Not at all, bro. You just said, 'I'll wear a dress if you wear a dress.' Like you didn't think I could. And I just figured I should let you know that I can." Wind tilted her head and looked down at me through her eyelashes. "If I'm going to be honest, the shoes hurt really bad and my hair is too tight. But it was worth it to see the look on your face." Her gaze softened a bit. "We all contain multitudes, Tig. You should see how Max cleans up when he's really given a moment and place to shine. Gay excellence, that one." And with that, Wind stepped across the porch and grabbed the large brass knocker. The noise was so startling that I almost dropped my bag. "You look really good, even if you bailed on the dress," Wind said gently. "Just take a deep breath and be yourself." So I took a deep breath and the door opened. An older woman with a sharp, asymmetrical gray haircut opened the door. She looked both of us up and down with an arch expression. "Huh, I'm surprised you showed up. Welcome to the Murder of Crows, Tig Torres," she said dryly. Her voice deep and resonant. She met my eyes and examined me with a look I couldn't quite figure out. It was almost resentful, but also kind of sad. I looked away quickly. If the rest of the Murder of Crows gave off the same vibes, we were in for a long evening. The auditorium is not at the end of the hall and to the right. The auditorium is at the end of this hall and to the right," she continued. "No recording equipment can be used on the premises." The woman turned around, the drapey fringed shawl she wore across her shoulders sweeping in a wide arc behind her. I can't wait to hear what you have to say, she smirked and sauntered down the hall. I raised my eyebrows at Lynn as she stepped into the foyer. Odd choice for a welcoming committee, I muttered. Lynn chuckled as she closed the door behind her, and then we both gasped when we finally turned around and got a load of the house. The space sprawled before us like a museum. The floors were dark wood with an intricate mosaic that matched the symbols and whorls of the wrought iron fence from outside. The walls were densely decorated with framed oil paintings, technical diagrams, and painstakingly preserved newspaper clippings. There was a long black carpet that stretched out from the front door all the way to the end of the hallway, where the woman who had opened the door for us had disappeared. Tig, what the hell is this house? Wynne asked. I gazed up in the huge chandelier above the entryway, its red crystals glinting coldly in the night. It reminds me of the Dijonais Club, I said. The what? Wynne asked. The Dijonais Club from Sherlock Holmes, I clarified. Look at the Murder of Crowe's logo around here. I can't believe someone lives here. Everything's so fancy. I don't know how to function around rich people, Theodore whispered. I don't know, Wynne said. I feel like with the shoes I blend right in. See? Wynne tossed her head back and pulled an extricated, snobbish expression, then sashayed down the hallway. Oh my God, stop, I hissed after her. Make me. Wynne tossed over her shoulder with a grin as she put one foot directly in front of the other, her hips swaying from side to side, a stunning replica of her runway strut. Before she reached the end of the hallway where the open door to the meeting room was, she turned on her heel, dropped her shoulder, and posed. Get back over here, I shrieked. Wynne goughed and kicked her heels off and tucked them under the arm. With a quick glance at the open door, she dashed back down the hallway in her stockings, sliding the last few feet until she hit the welcome mat and caught herself against the front door. Oh my God, Wynne. What if someone saw you? I said with a laugh. What if I did? Wynne said, putting her shoes down neatly in the corner. They're probably just glad we came. Besides, now that you're not anxious about your big speech. I sighed. You're right. It did help a bit. Wynne held out her hand and led me to the meeting room, barefoot, and something in my chest warmed up and settled a little. As we got further down the hallway, I could hear voices and the clinking of glasses. We stepped into the auditorium, which appeared to be a large 3-story dining room that had been converted into a lecture hall, both much grander and much smaller than I had assumed it would be. As we came through the French doors, Mr. Green pushed through the small crowd to greet us, much more warmly than the woman who had opened the door. It's wonderful to see you, my dear, and what a lovely guest you've brought. You must be Wynne Abbott. I'd recognize that vivacious spirit anywhere, Mr. Green exclaimed, reaching out to shake both our hands. Everyone will get settled in a moment, and you can start at the front of the room near the large armchair. There is a seat for your guest near in the front, in case she has to add something to the presentation. Mr. Green patted the top of my hand, gave a short, polite bow, and went to find his seat. The auditorium was arranged with a large table at the back, with drinks and a few platters of sliced fruit and cheese. There was seating for at least 30 people, wood chairs arranged in a semicircle, crowding around the large emerald green tufted armchair at the front of the room. To either side of the armchair were 2 smaller armchairs in brown leather, almost like the seating was meant for a panel. The guests were already beginning to settle into the audience space, and the room was getting quieter as they waited for me to begin. I pulled the maps, newspaper clippings, and photographs out of my bag and set them in a neat pile at the foot of the armchair. I took a moment to look at the members. There were some people I recognized, like Ella's dad, Mayor Elridge Highsmith, and the town librarian. But there were also a lot of strangers, emphasis on the strange. Like a tall woman dressed head to toe in white, with eyebrows and hair bleached to a match, and a set of twins who had Sirius the Shining energy. But even more odd, across the room, roughly 25 feet from the ground, was a medium-sized cutout in the wall. Through the opening, there was an old man dressed in a gray robe peering down the festivities. I squinted up at him, but he was too far away to recognize that he was holding some kind of looking glass in front of his face while watching the crowd. Then, suddenly, he spun the glass in my direction and raised his hand in greeting. I gasped involuntarily. What the hell was this place? Before I could question it further, Mr. Green cleared his throat and stood up, opening his arms wide to address the crowd. Friends and enemies and those without designation, he said, his eyes twinkling, we have a treat tonight. Quite recently, our little town, and more specifically our little group, was rocked with a series of gruesome murders, clever as they were cruel. As we trembled among one another, the foundations of our fraternity shaken by the blood-stained hands of our betrayer, our town's clever young minds were hard at work. Facing danger and disaster, they refuse to bow beneath the horror. Tonight, their leader is here to tell the tale of how they faced the Lit Killer and emerged from his clutches victorious. I would like to introduce you to the incandescent Tig Torres. The crowd clapped, and I squared my shoulders. Good evening, I began. I would like to thank Mr. Green for inviting me and Wynne to your meeting. I faltered as the crowd stared back at me in expectation. This was somehow much harder and much worse than presenting a class project at school. As Mr. Green said, my name is Tig Torres, and I'll be speaking to you about my experience with the Lit Killer. Finally, some of the members and audience leaned forward in interest, and more than one opened a notebook, their pens poised to take notes. A serious audience was hard, but a curious one? I could work at that. You know, when you see something that's not quite right, when a solution seems too convenient, almost to the point where it's insulting, then you get that feeling that nags in the back of your brain like a tangle of yarn that needs to be picked at. Well, everything about the Lit Killer was miles of string, snarled over itself and pulled tight, into patterns in some places and knots in the others. I couldn't just let it be, and from what I've been led to believe, I don't think any of you would have either. I got up from the armchair and picked up the first of my documents, holding it up for the audience to see. This is Beth Torres, the Lit Killer's favorite victim, an investigator who got so close to solving the mystery that she paid with her life. She was also the patsy police blamed for the Lit Killer's murders, and she was my aunt. From the instant I stepped into this town, I knew that I had to avenge her death by bringing the real killer to justice, because no one else would. When I finished telling my story, several members dashed up from their seats to ask questions, as Wynne and I gathered the disorganized papers from the presentation that were littered in front of the armchair. That was wonderful, Tig. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Green swanned in. He placed a friendly hand on my forearm so he could tug me a few feet away from the din. The way you handled all the darkness was impeccable. We're very lucky to have you in our little town. Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm glad you liked it, I said, looking over my shoulder at Wynne. She had taken the opportunity to launch into more details with some of the members who were looking up at her in awe and fascination. What would be even luckier is if you were interested in accepting an invitation to be a more familiar face around these parts, he said a bit more quietly. What? I turned back to him, confused. We would like to offer you a membership to the Murder of Crows, Mr. Green clarified. You're an exceptional young detective, and your grasp of the bigger picture is exquisite. A lot of our members are getting older, and we'd love to invite more young people like yourself to keep this tradition alive. We have resources that would... I'm so sorry, Mr. Green, I interrupted him, but I'm going to have to decline. I just have a lot of going on right now, you know? Mr. Green looked disappointed. It's not that I would love to attend, maybe sometime in the future, I said quickly. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Then, smiling, he patted my hand once again. Oh, you don't have to let me down easy. I'm grown up enough for bad news. I appreciate the gesture, though, and our offer to use our library still stands, independent of membership. I nodded and smiled, glad he seemed to be comfortable with my answer. I hope you'll stay and look around and have some refreshments. The first floor is entirely open to guests, however. I must ask that you refrain from going upstairs. These old walls are filled with so many secrets. We can't have a little detective like you figuring them all out. Mr. Green gave me one last short bow and a wink and stepped away to join another group. I saw a flash from the corner of my eye as Mr. Green walked away. It was the old man in the cutout window above the auditorium. He waited until I was sure I was looking, and then he slowly looked away and pointedly gestured for me to come up before he disappeared again. Wynne caught my eye from across the room, where the crowd around her finally dispersed. She cocked an eyebrow in question, and I grinned in response, jerking my head toward the door. Maybe this evening wouldn't be so boring after all. And that will conclude Chapter 3 of Murder of Crows. If you would like to hear Chapter 4, come back next time and listen to the journey of Murder of Crows.